Hello, my name is Ray Hughes, and I'm an interviewer for the Veterans History Project, conducted by the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and locally administered by the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library, and monitored by Brian Powers, who is our cameraman today. Today's date is the 14th of August, 2019, and we have the honor and privilege today of interviewing World War II veteran Paul Eugene Sallada. Mr. Sallada, it's a pleasure to meet you. And
thank you.
All right to call you Paul?
Correct.
Yes, sir. Paul, if you would, tell us your date of birth and where you were born.
Born April 18, 1919.
I see.
Get the 19 and 18 mixed up. Born here in South Dakota.
I see. And what were your parents' names, Paul?
Clarence and Dina.
Dina. And what did your dad do for a living?
Dad had his manufacturing company.
And
he had the original patent on hot air furnace humidifiers.
I see. And did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a sister 5 years older than me.
And her name?
Ruth.
Ruth. And were your parents from South Dakota?
No, Dad was born in Pennsylvania and Mother down in Nebraska. And they met in Sioux City, Iowa.
What was he doing in Sioux City, Iowa?
That's where their families lived there, and they met. Then they moved to Huron.
I see. And your grandparents, do you, on your mother's side, do you recall them?
I never met them.
I see.
And Dad's mother lived with us for about 5 years in Minneapolis.
And what was her name?
Mary.
Mary, I see. Now your mother, did your mother work also, or is she?
No.
No.
She was not employed.
Yeah, that's what I meant. And what schools did you go to?
Central High School in Minneapolis.
I see. You folks moved from Huron to Minneapolis?
Yeah.
How old were you when you moved?
I'm 4 years old when I moved.
Why did you move there?
Start the business.
Okay. And what church did you folks belong to there?
Presbyterian Church. Oliver Presbyterian Church.
I see. And the schools that you went to there, grade school and?
Central High.
Okay. Did you play sports while you were in high school?
No.
No. What was your plans after high school?
Pardon?
What were you planning on doing with yourself after high school?
I started college. I went to University of Minnesota for a year, and Dad wanted me to get into the company, so I quit that, went with him.
At Minneapolis?
Yeah.
What year did you go to work for your dad there then, for the company?
37.
And how long, you were still working for him when World War II started?
Yeah, I worked for him and shifted off onto another company for a while.
Why'd you do that?
Dad was closing down because of the war. He couldn't get brass or copper for his product, so we closed down.
I see. You said your dad had a patent, the original patent for...
Hot air for humidifiers in hot air furnaces.
But because of the war, you couldn't get copper or
Couldn't
any
get it. He just retired and quit working.
And did you go to work for a different company, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked for Howell Pipe. It was a grain and well drilling outfit. I was in the office there for a couple of years.
Did you have 1 year of college then, or 2?
1 year there. Then after I came back, we moved here to Cincinnati to take advantage of the co-op system.
GI Bill and co-op?
GI Bill. I got my master's in mechanical engineering.
Let's go back to 1941 then. Do you recall where you were on December the 7th, 1941?
Yeah.
And could you tell us about that? How you heard about the attack?
Actually, it was Sunday afternoon, and I was out driving by myself. And I just kept driving and listening.
And it was coming over your car radio?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recall it? Did you plan on joining the military after you heard that, or did it?
I knew I'd be drafted, so I picked the Navy instead of getting drafted.
Because you were 22 then, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you join?
When?
Yes.
February 20th, 45.
No, not 40.
42.
So you went down and joined, for all intents and purposes, right after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Where did you join at, in Minneapolis?
Minneapolis, yeah.
What made you choose the Navy?
Because I didn't want the Army.
I don't think.
I didn't want the Marines.
Yeah.
I mean...
and where did they send you after you joined?
First, we were in the first company from Minneapolis to go out to San Diego. Normally, when you join in Minneapolis, you went to Great Lakes.
Right, Chicago, yeah.
And we were the first company that went to San Diego. And we were in Balboa Park out there. That's where we had our boot camp.
What did your mom and dad think of you joining the Navy? No problems?
No problem.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they knew that I had to go.
Yeah.
So it was up to me to decide.
You're 22 and single?
Yep, at that time.
Yeah.
And then I called them and asked if I could have a couple of weeks off before I left. And they said, yeah. So I got married so Jane could join me if I were in the States.
Oh, okay.
So they gave me a couple of weeks off, and we got married and had a honeymoon and went down through Norman, Oklahoma, and that's where I was stationed later on. Kind of comical.
Well, then you brought Jane up. What was Jane's full name before you married her?
Jane Harvey.
Jane Harvey?
Yeah.
And where was she from?
She was living in Wichita, Kansas at that time. Her father was an Internal Revenue agent.
Where had you met Jane to begin with?
In Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis?
Yeah.
How'd you meet her?
I had a ski accident, and my girlfriend at that time wanted to come out to see me, and she took Jane with her and introduced me to Jane, and a couple of years later,
you and Jane became...
Jane and I became started in.
And how long did you go with Jane?
Which way? We were married 71 years. Our first date celebration was 80 years.
So you went with Jane probably 8 years before you got married?
9 years, yeah,
9
because
years.
she went to college in Wichita, and she would come up and live with my folks for the summer. So we had summers together.
I see.
And then we got married, and she came out to San Diego, and she was at San Diego for the 3 months that I was in San Diego.
What was the date of your marriage, Paul?
March 7th.
1942. And so you went to San Diego. You're the first company to be sent there from Minneapolis. And Jane followed you out there?
After she got done teaching in June, while she came out, she worked at Consolidated Aircraft. All Navy wives were accepted.
Yeah. And tell us about boot camp at San Diego.
It was very, it was beginning, because they never had the boot camp there in Balboa Park before, and so we almost experimented. It wasn't too much exercising and that kind of stuff. And then I was asked to work in the office after the boot camp finished, so I stayed there for 3 months, working in the camp office.
Personnel office and
Yeah.
things like that? Yeah. Well, you were one of the older guys in your outfit then, weren't you?
I was always the old man.
At 22.
Always.
Yes. And where was Jane living when she came out there?
We had a one-room in a house, very unsatisfactory because of housing conditions. And the woman next door asked us if we would take care of her house because her husband was on a destroyer and he was pulling into New York, into the East Coast, and he'd be there for 3 months. So she said, would you take care of, you want to live in my house? So we had a beautiful home to live in for 3 months, no charge.
Smart move.
Can't turn down something like that.
No. Did Jane get a job while she was in California?
Yeah. at Consolidated Aircraft.
Now, Consolidated produced the B-24, didn't they?
No, they were PBY at that place.
Uh-huh. And did she work in the factory, or?
Yeah, she worked in the factory. She was, what kind of?
Was she a Rosie the Riveter?
Riveter, yep. It's quite an experience for her.
I can imagine, yeah.
She stayed there after I left. Why, she stayed there for about 3 weeks till her woman come home, and then she left and went back to Wichita.
I see. And how long were you at San Diego, Balboa Park there?
Pardon?
When was your tour at Balboa Park up?
In 3 months, it was up in around September.
Okay, 42.
Yeah.
And now, what have you been trained in that 4-month period of time, 5-month period of time?
The training there was not too evident. Mm-hmm. I worked in the office actually as yeoman, of Navy terms, and the chief that was over me, he said, you can only stay here 3 months. He said, the 3 months is coming up. So he said, where would you like to go to school? He said, I can get you in any school you want. And I didn't have actually any choice. I said, what would you suggest? And he said, well, I would suggest that you go to Aviation Ordinance up in Seattle, Sandpoint Air Station in Seattle, because he said it'll only be a couple of months up there before they move to the new school in Norman, Oklahoma. And Norman is right close to Wichita. So he said, you can go up to Seattle, then drop back down to Norman, and you'll be close to your wife home. So that's what I did. And he
must have thought a lot of you.
Well, he did. And he said, if you behave yourself, get through school, he said there'll be openings for instructors, and he says you can get 2.5 years in Norman as an instructor before they have to ship you out. So I did.
And so, where did you go for the first school? To Washington State, did you say?
Pardon?
Washington State? For the first school in aircraft ordnance?
Up in Seattle.
Seattle, Washington?
Sandpoint Navy Base, Air Base. And it was...
Tell us about the schooling.
It was not very much to it, from a standpoint that they were closing to get down to go to Norman. So as far as the schooling went, why, it was not very good. But then when we got to Norman, why, we had the schooling down there where it was efficient.
Well, how long were you there at
Seattle?
Seattle.
I was only up there a couple months.
Okay. And then you moved to Norman, Oklahoma?
Yeah.
And when you guys moved down there, did you go by train?
No, another guy and he was going to Iowa. I was going to Wichita, and we hitchhiked. And the first ride we got, he said, you guys, well, he found out where we were going. He said, we've got to catch that Jeep up ahead of us. And he caught the Army Jeep. There was two guys in a Jeep. And they were going to the East Coast. And so we had Army Jeep transportation all the way from the coast and west until I got to Wichita. We traveled with them, and we stopped at night, got hotels, and
wow.
They got a lot of kidding about having two sailors riding with them, but
so I can imagine, yeah. What rank are you at that time?
pardon?
What rank were you at that time?
I was Seaman's first class at that time.
So did you go right straight to Norman, Oklahoma and report in?
Well, I stopped in Wichita for about a week,
Okay.
then went down to Norman.
Now Wichita is in Kansas?
Yeah.
And what was Jane doing there in Wichita?
Her folks lived there.
I see.
So,
What was her mom and dad's name?
Mabel and Wallace,
Harvey?
yeah, Harvey,
And you said he was an IRS agent?
yeah. Yep.
And
And she was active in church work.
Who was?
She was.
Jane or
No,
her mother?
Mom.
Yeah.
Oh, Jane too. Both of us have been active in church.
I see. So you reported to Norman, Oklahoma, and what was the name of that base?
Training station.
Norman, Oklahoma Training Station, Naval Training Station?
There was some initials, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. And what were your duties there?
We had school, got through school and graduated and turned right around and stayed there as an instructor.
What was the school about? What was the training you got?
Aviation, Ordinance, and mechanics, and metal workers. There was 3 schools in the one base. The Ordinance, there were over 100 instructors when they got it going full blast.
Now, by ordinance, does that mean weapons?
Aviation Ordinance.
And what does that mean, though? Is that
Any fire, any bomb, guns on aircraft.
And what are your duties in regards to those?
Well, at Norman,
In the school, I mean, the safekeeping and storing or discharge?
I mean, how they work and what to do with them, how to install them.
And there were 2 other courses you said.
Oh, the metal workers and had mechanics. I had nothing to do with that bunch.
Okay. And how long was that course?
Course was about 2 months. It was very thorough.
Now, in the meantime, is Jane coming up, or are you going home?
Jane came down right away, and we spent Christmas together down in Norman. So,
Now, that's Christmas of 1942.
yeah.
And did she get a place to live there in Norman?
She got the job as assistant manager of the cafeteria in the University of Oklahoma, and the job only paid $25 a month, but there was a 2-room apartment in the Student Union building that was included cleaning and everything. So we had a palace because there wasn't any homes in Norman.
You've been living under a star this whole time.
Yeah.
You know.
Everything fell in place.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's wonderful. So after you finished school there, you graduated, and what happens to you then?
I got my 3rd class rating, and I started in teaching small arms. I taught for about a year, and then I was supervisor of the small arm department. I had 6 instructors in small arms.
This may sound silly to you, but what do you teach about the small arms and things to people, to seamen or Army guys, anybody?
Well, the reason we had small arms, we taught 3 of them, the 35 Colt revolver, the Thompson submachine gun, and the Browning automatic rifle. That was our small arms. Because of the operation of them, we wanted to teach the operation so that when they went on to the 30 caliber and 50 caliber machine guns, they would understand how the thing worked. In other words, that was basic operation of guns.
I think this picture here, you remember that picture?
I've seen it.
That's a picture.
That was me teaching submachine gun when I was teaching.
And that's a Thompson submachine gun there.
Yeah.
Very interesting. After you finished your schooling, then you went into being an instructor.
Then, after a year or so, then I was supervisor of the 6 instructors. There were 6 in the small arm.
I see.
We had 6 classes going. 2 nights, 2 shifts a day. We had the morning shift starting up till 3 o'clock. Then at 4:30 or so, we had the night shift. We had that many students.
That many students coming through there.
Yeah.
Well, we did have a large Navy by the time the end of the war came.
We had a bunch of them.
Started out with a small Navy and ended up with one of the world's largest. So how long were you an instructor there and supervisor?
I was there 2.5 years.
2.5 years. So September of 42, 43, 44.
I left there in December of 44.
Yes. And what was your last job there?
There?
At Norman.
I was supervisor.
Supervisor. And what rank are you then?
I was 1st class.
Seaman 1st class? Or 1st class petty officer?
Aviation petty officer. 1st class.
And Is Jane still there?
Jane was still with me, and our son was born in the Navy hospital, our oldest son, Paul. And she left there and went with Paul and went back home when I shipped out to go to California.
And you had orders to go where in California?
That's kind of a question. Alameda is one of them, and I'll bring out my.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Shoemaker, California. There's a strange happening. I was not told where I was going. I mean, I had orders to go to California, but no reason, nothing, didn't know where I was going to be when I got out there. I got out there, and there was a Navy guy picked up some of us that came up by train, and he took me to a dock and introduced me to the captain of a Standard Oil tanker. And I was told that I would ride over with the tanker to the islands, Hawaiian Islands. And there were 4 of us that was assigned to the tanker, and there were 3 or 4 F-4U fighter planes on the deck of this tanker. And we pulled a barge with 1 million gallons of aircraft gasoline. And it took us 10 days to get to Pearl Harbor. But I did not have any idea where I was going after I got to Pearl Harbor.
Where'd you leave from, Alameda?
Yeah. And he told us to set up our watch. We were supposed to have watches all through the night, 24 hours a day watching the planes. Like the captain said, who's going to take them? Who's going to bother them? He says, if you get trouble, he said, we'll wake you up. He says, relax, have a nice 10-day cruise, good food, library, ship that you can go any place on, and enjoy life. So we did. I set up the watches. That this guy had this watch, this guy set up 3 watches, and I was the boss, and we all had a good time. So.
And there was a Standard Oil tanker.
Standard Oil tanker.
I'll be done.
I gained about 15 pounds.
In 10 days.
I mean, it was fabulous food. 4 meals a day, 5 if you wanted them. Good cruise.
So you arrived at Pearl Harbor.
Arrived in Pearl Harbor.
And what, you remember the date?
No, not particularly.
Or about?
I was on open, we were in open seas on Christmas.
Of 44?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
now we know.
New Year's Eve, the biggest song at that time was "Don't Fence Me In."
Don't fence me in, right?
There we were out in the ocean. Then we got over to Pearl Harbor. I was picked up immediately and taken to the airport, and I got on a Navy plane and went to Maui. And Maui had a last gunnery station for the aircraft for the squadron. They were shooting tow targets, and each plane had a color. The projectiles were dipped in paint, and when they fired through the tow target, why, it would leave their color as a whole. And they had their ratings based
on the paint.
by the number of holes, by the number of reds, and it was kind of a funny deal because there was one of the pilots couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He never had 8 holes. So he bribed one of the guys to put extra shots in one of the other planes, and so he had plenty of holes that day. But when we got out in the fleet, he was the first one to get a red circle on his plane.
He shot down a Japanese fighter.
Yeah.
Wow.
Couldn't hit broadside of a barn, but he got the first zero.
So much for gunnery training. No. You were in charge of that, Paul? Also?
Pardon?
Were you in charge of that also?
I was halfway. I did not know what my capacity was. I did not know that I was going to be stuck with that squadron. They didn't tell me that. Nobody, that's one of the things. Didn't know at all where I was going or what I was going to be doing. And I was there for a couple of months, and I got to know some of the squadron, some of the pilots, naturally. They left, and then they told me I was leaving, and I went over and got on the Franklin aircraft carrier. I wasn't told that I was a passenger or what I was doing.
The Franklin, was that CV-19?
Yeah, and so we traveled from the island to Ulithi, and I did not have anything to do. I wasn't told I was a passenger. And actually what happened was I was a passenger on the Franklin over to Ulithi, and I was assigned to the Essex.
At Ulithi?
At Ulithi, I went to the Essex. Then I found out...
You were lucky to get off the Franklin.
5 days later, the Franklin was hit.
Yeah.
And when I got over to the Essex, I saw some of the squadron guys, some of the pilots that I knew. Then I started putting 2 and 2 together, that I was not assigned to the Essex, I was assigned to the squadron. And I had been assigned to the squadron ever since I left Norman.
But didn't know it.
Didn't know it. And that kind of burned me that you didn't, nothing was, I knew none of this.
What was, which squadron was that, Paul?
It's the F4U Cashew 4 squadron.
On the Essex?
On the Essex.
And the Essex was CV-9.
CV.
And that was the first ship built in what was called the Essex class.
Yep. It's the biggest at that time.
Right. We're familiar with the Franklin because one of our good friends was on the Franklin when it was hit. And you'll meet him in a couple of weeks. But the Essex was they were bigger than the previous aircraft carriers, both in length and width.
Yeah.
You carried more planes.
It was big. I mean,
so
you can't realize how big they are unless you actually get on one of them. In fact, when my wife and I were traveling later years, we went on the Essex, there was an aircraft carrier stationed at Charleston, and you can go out and visit.
right.
And it was a sister ship of the Essex. So I took Jane out to shore where I spent 9 months, and we had complete.
Most people don't realize you can get lost on it or an aircraft carrier.
You can get lost easy.
Yeah.
You can't.
Now, that squadron you were assigned to, what aircraft were they flying?
Flying? We had the F4Us fighters. We had the Grumman fighters, Hellcats. We had TBMs, torpedo planes, and we had the SB-2C dive bomber. We had all 4 of them.
Now, did you fly in these planes? Did you ever physically fly in the planes?
I flew on torpedo bombers once a month or twice a month, whenever they had refueling day, they would send up planes with targets to make sure the radar on their guns was working.
The radar? The TBM, it carried what, 3 men?
Yeah.
Where did you sit?
Sat in the turret. I was in the turret, but I was the ordnanceman, and the targets came under the ordnanceman, so I let the targets out of the plane, and we pulled them about a mile behind the plane. Well, and
yeah, you want to make sure you don't.
And no kidding, one time up, why, there was a shell broke back of us, and there was no foil in the target, so the radar was fastening onto the plane instead of the target, and we got out of there.
Wow. So you would actually go up and fly. Did you get flight pay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they, to compensate for my work, because I was on the flight deck, every takeoff and every landing, I was on the flight deck, monitoring. And the extra work that I had to do, they gave me flight pay to make up for it.
And how much was that?
50% of your base pay per month.
Yeah.
4 hours, pretty good hourly rate.
I was going to ask you, how long of a time would you fly a month, roughly? 4 hours?
Practically everything that left the carrier was on a cycle of 4 hours.
And did you fly in any other planes besides the TBM?
Yeah, I did once. Torpedo bomber. I mean the other bomber, but it was just a...
There was only 2 people on that, wasn't it?
Yep.
So you flew on it once?
Once. That was enough.
I can imagine.
The pilot, the TBM pilot that I flew with, swore that he was going to get me on a dive bomber, and he got me on it for a short time.
It must have been some experience, huh?
You can't imagine the life on a carrier. One of the fellows' wife sent him black soil in an envelope and sent him fertilizer in an envelope and sent him bean seeds in an envelope. And on the flight deck there's a tie-down trough. So this guy cleaned out right by the island, upright. He cleaned out one of them, put the dirt down there, put the fertilizer, put the bean seeds, and we had green beans growing on the flight deck right by the island. And there was a plane that crashed on the deck, and it veered off toward the island, and the captain came on the speaker system and said, "You better not have hit those green beans." I mean, you know, we had stuff like this going on refurnishing days when we getting supplies. They'd drop the front elevator down and they had basketball court on it. And this one shouldn't be told, I guess, but Admiral Byrd was right next to our shop. We had a shop office on the level of the ready room, just under the flight deck, and the Admiral's quarter was from there forward. Admiral Byrd was on the ship.
Byrd?
Yep. And the air conditioning came in our room and made a right turn down to the Admiral's quarter. So there was a hole cut in the duct and a slide shutter on it. So we had air conditioning. Well, we also, being that we had day and night flights, our meals were always screwed up. So we had a toaster that one of the guys made, went down and got plaster of Paris out of the medical, filled up an ammunition cutting, went to the electric shop and got wire, made a toaster. So we had sandwiches at midnight. I mean, you know, you need something to eat while you make a Spam sandwich. One night, a knock came on the door, and we had just finished making sandwiches. A knock came on the door, and come on in. You know, an officer had to get permission to go into enlisted man's quarters. So we invited this officer in, and we had officers in our place. Pilots would come in and see us, and I mean, it was ready rooms were right there. Well, this guy at night, he came in, and he says, "Can I make me a sandwich?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'll help you." "No," he says, "you stay up in your bunk." He said, "I can make it." And he started to get ready to make a sandwich, and he said, "Oh, you can't make a sandwich without onion rings." He said, "I'll be right back." And about 5 minutes later, he was back, and there was a knock on the door. It was a guy from the commissary with a platter with nice big slices of onion. Put onions on his sandwich and stood there and talked to us, and he said, "Would you please do me a favor?" "Yes, sir." He says, "When you going to make sandwiches at night, would you close your vent?" He said, "The odor of the sandwich comes down my air conditioning," and this was Admiral Byrd.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
He was one.
He's a pretty good guy.
He was a prince. And there was...
That's remarkable.
There was another time he came to me. I was on the flight deck taking care of one of the commander's plane, and it was a refueling day, and usually the officers in the lower part of the ship used to come up on the deck, and they'd ask you all kinds of questions about the airplanes. And I was busy putting the ammunition can in a wing, and there was a pair of khaki pants walked up and said, "I got a question I'd like to ask you." I said, "Just wait till I get this done and I'll answer you." And I got it done and turned around, and there was 5 stars on a collar. It was Admiral Byrd. And he said, "Your last name is Sallada." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Are you related to Admiral Sallada?" And Admiral Sallada at that time was the commander of the 5th Fleet. And I said, "No relation." Well, he said, "Just keep it quiet." He said, "Half of the officers of the ship think that you're related." And he said, "You can do anything you want to do." Now that's a good insignia of what Admiral Byrd was.
Just keep it quiet. That's remarkable, too. What a wonderful story, Paul. Oh.
It was there was a lot of fun. We had to have some fun to keep going.
Yeah.
My job on any flight takeoff, we had to check to see that the wire from the fuse went up to a catch on the plane, and that wire had to be sticking out beyond the propeller that armed the fuse. And if the propeller wasn't turning, your fuse wasn't armed, your bomb wasn't armed, and when they dropped the bomb, the snap on the plane would hold that end of the wire, and the other end would strip out as the bomb fell. If they wanted to drop the bomb non-exploding, well, they could do it by releasing the wire with it. But every plane that took off had to have that wire checked to see that that was on there, so that the propeller wouldn't be turning and arming the bomb while the guy was flying.
How many bombs did the planes carry?
Well, on the squad, on mine, there was only one on the belly.
That's a TBM?
No,
Or
F4U.
F4U?
Fighter planes.
Right, okay.
And, but that meant that I had to be on all takeoffs. Then when the planes came in, each one of the divisions would be standing there with the the color hat that the division was. Mine was red. And when the plane landed and unhooked and started forward to go up to park, the pilot would give you the thumbs up or thumbs down on your system. In other words, if everything was fine with the ordinance, I'd get a thumbs up. If something was wrong, thumbs down, and I could identify and get someone immediately on that plane to talk to the pilot to find out what was wrong. So you was on duty anytime planes were taking off or landing.
And what areas of the Pacific were you in at this time when you were on the Essex?
Well, what?
What areas of the Pacific?
From Okinawa to Japan.
Were you there during the Battle of the Okinawa?
Yep.
Wow.
That's when I first got on it.
That was a terrible, terrible battle. We had some.
A pretty good taste. It was.
It started on
Easter
April the 1st.
Sunrise service. I mean sunrise Easter when we launched the first plane.
The battle, I think, started April the 1st of 45.
Yeah.
Wow. You were there for the entire duration of the Okinawa battle?
Okinawa, we were there until Okinawa was taken. Carrier was. And moved on to the next one, next island.
Did you have any kamikazes hit your plane, your ship?
Any what?
Kamikazes?
We had one that took off one of our radar masks And that was the one that crashed in the water, and the pilot got out and he was shooting at us with his pistol. He was in the water. He was shooting up, and the lieutenant that I was with settled him right quick. And we had one kamikaze that hit the lower back part of the ship on the side, made a big dent in the ship. Didn't bother us. I mean, there was no leakage, except that we had a little private shower that we had on our deck, and hot water was kicked out. So we didn't have any hot water for quite a while.
Oh.
That was the only damage.
Now, your aircraft, did you lose any of your fighter aircraft or TBMs?
Yeah. Quite a few. Pretty lucky though. I mean, we didn't lose as many as the rest of them did.
Yeah.
Those are the things you don't talk about.
Right. Tell us about the chow on board the... Would you like to take a break right now for a couple of minutes?
I don't care.
Yes, we're back from a short break. And you were going to tell me about that wire.
On a plane, your bomb has got a fuse screwed into the nose of it. And on that fuse is a propeller, a little fan blade. And it has to turn a certain number of times before the bomb is armed. You put a wire through a part of the bomb fuse, put a wire through with a clip on it, just a slide clip. It's sticking there, and the propeller of the arming of the bomb is stopped because that little wire is sticking out there. That wire is fastened to a gadget up in the plane. And if the pilot wants to drop the bomb unarmed, not to go off, he releases that. When he drops the bomb, he releases, and the wire stays with the bomb and it doesn't explode. Now, if you want the bomb to go off, you don't monkey with this gadget. You drop your bomb and it strips off it just strips the wire off. Then the pilot drops the wire afterwards. But then the propeller of the bomb fuse has to turn so many times before it arms
the bomb itself.
Arms the bomb itself. And we got into a mess. At one time, they they sent fuses that had plastic propellers on them. The little fan blade was plastic instead of aluminum. And the only trouble was the plastic at times was not strong enough to hold the wind. The wind was too strong for the plastic propeller, and sometimes the propeller broke. And when the propeller broke, the bomb was armed and the pilot was flying. And we lost one plane that blew up that way. And immediately all fuses were
replaced,
stopped, and only the metal fuse. But the pilots themselves, flying in formation, one of them would drop down and fly underneath, looking to see if the propeller was all right, until they got metal ones back again. I mean, it was kind of touchy.
I can only imagine. That's the first time that's been explained, where it's very clear, very, very good explanation.
Even the bomber had the dive bombers. They had the same system.
So during the Battle of Okinawa, your planes were taking off and landing continuously all day, every day?
Constantly.
I think one of the other questions that I asked you was about the chow, the regular chow on board the Essex.
The chow?
Yes. Of course, you were a little spoiled.
We had the chow on the Essex was excellent, except when a supply ship got hit. And a ship bringing pork and something like that got hit. You didn't have any pork until the next supply ship came. And then you'd be stuck with beef for 5 or 10 days.
That's a tough. So one of the supply ships was hit there at Okinawa, huh?
Quite a few times.
Quite a few.
Yeah. There'd be an announcement. Well, guess we got beef for the next 5 days.
That's a tough life.
We got pork for the next 5 days. The chow, to me, the chow on the Essex was tops.
Excuse me.
And we had 5 meals a day, because we had breakfast at 2 o'clock in the morning, because on a dawn flight, why, you had to be up at 2 o'clock, have breakfast and get down, get everything loaded by 3:30, 4 o'clock for takeoff.
How far off the coast of Okinawa were you operating when your planes were taking off?
I don't know.
You were constantly moving the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Never a sitting duck, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, the ship the whole fleet is going as a unit. In fact, one of the pilots that I flew with, he said, "Do you want to see something that you'll remember all your life?" I said, "Yeah." So he went up to about 8,000 or 10,000 feet. And we looked down, and there was the whole fleet. Now you can't imagine what a sight it was to see all those ships, hundreds of them, all going in formation. It's the biggest sight that I ever saw.
Yeah. Do you recall any of the pilots that you served with, their names?
No.
What about the regular seamen that you served with?
I don't remember any of them.
You remember Admiral Byrd?
Admiral Byrd, and the other experience that you have is the catapult. The first time I took off on the deck, why, it was a taxi run. In other words, we were back and we taxied off of the deck. Just gunned it and went down the deck and took off. And the second time I did it, I went to catapult, and that's quite an experience because the catapult was 70 feet long, and you were going 78 knots when you left the deck. So you went from 0 to 78 miles an hour in 70 feet. And you lost, you couldn't move. I mean, on flying in the turret, put your hands across the top of the 50 millimeter, put your head down in your hands, and you had trap door closed, you was all right. But if you didn't have your head down in your hands when that thing fired, why, you were in trouble. The pilots would set the plane, set the instruments of what, when they took off, they always banked over to the right, get away from the front of the ship. And they'd set their feet and their stick and lock it in the, so it wouldn't move when they catapult. They couldn't, first 100 feet off the ship, boy, they couldn't do anything.
Wow.
I don't know what the G's were, but it was impossible to move. And landing, why, I had one experience of landing where the ship was going 35 knots, and we had a 35-knot wind, and the plane landed at 70 miles an hour. And we went down to land, and the ship was running away from us.
I'm just gonna say.
He had to gun it to keep up with the ship, and we landed 0 speed.
The ship's going this way, you're coming this way.
Well, ship's going that way, and you're landing this way.
Okay, all right.
70.
You're both going 70.
35 miles an hour, ship was moving in 35-mile wind. So there you had a 70-mile breeze coming across the deck.
Yes, yeah, and you're
And
coming.
your plane landed at 70 miles an hour. So when you come down, it was 0 speed.
That's got to be.
It only happened once, but the pilot told me, he said, you experienced something that nobody else has experienced.
Wow. So, after Okinawa, you said something about you went to Japan?
Well, from Okinawa to Japan is all the other islands
In between?
in between, and we hit all of them.
Were you, how far north did you go? To Honshu or Ryukyu?
We were up above.
Ryukyu?
We were up above Japan, and you could tell where you were going by. If you're going south, all of a sudden your water in the water fountain would get a little salty. They'd give you, for hot weather, why they'd put salt.
Oh, they did?
Instead of giving you a salt tablet, why they would just make the water a little salty.
I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting.
And if you're going north, why, pretty soon you'd be told to get issue of a cold weather clothes for your flight deck.
So when you're cruising off of the coast of Japan or out, could you actually see the islands as were you flying missions off of the Essex?
I didn't fly any fighting flights.
Right. But were the ships?
The ships, the battleships, carriers, cruisers, they never saw the islands. They were always open sea.
Did any of your aircraft fly over Japan proper? And
Yeah.
were you?
They bombed Japan. But that was the object.
Right.
But interesting was they never bombed the palace or the main building of Japan.
Did you have any more trouble with kamikazes up there?
Not too much. By the time we got up close to Japan, why, they were all gone practically. We had a couple of attacks of kamikaze boats, which were like speedboat, but they were bombs. And we had several attacks of those at night.
Wow.
And you'd sit on the flight deck and watch the fun, because the destroyers would take them off. None of them ever got through.
Did you lose many aircraft when you were after Okinawa?
After Okinawa?
Yeah, when you were up around Japan.
Not too much, because their planes were not, airfields were prime target.
Where were you at? Were you aware that we were dropping nuclear bombs, or atom bombs, rather?
We were told that they dropped a bomb, a huge bomb. Nothing said nuclear.
Right.
We were told that a huge bomb was dropped that may end the war. That's the information we got.
And where were you at when they announced that Japan had surrendered?
Close to Japan. We were bombing Japan at that time.
Did you ever go ashore on Japan proper?
I had 9-month cruise.
Well, you had a danger-filled 9 months, regardless, you know, in the thick of things.
Well, it was not quite 9 months. It was from April 1st until 10th of October.
Did you ever get liberty in the Far East besides Hawaii?
They had one stop at an island, some little island, and they had a liberty deal, and I didn't even go on.
You know, normally I don't stop and take questions at this point in the interview, but I don't want to move on beyond this point without asking Brian if he has any questions about this period in time.
I'm just curious, when you went to Oklahoma, can you hear me okay?
Oklahoma?
When you went to Oklahoma, and you were going to school there,
Yeah.
did you know you were going to be an instructor?
Know any of the instructors?
Did you know you were going to become an instructor when you took classes?
I didn't get the question.
He said when you went there to school in Norman, Oklahoma, did you have a feeling that you were going to be an instructor after you'd finished school, or?
Yeah. I mean, I was told if I behaved myself going to school, I'd probably be kept as an instructor if I wanted to be. So I behaved myself.
I was wondering, did you have to adjust to being on the sea? Did you have any problems with seasickness, or was the aircraft carrier so big? Ray?
No seasickness.
Okay.
No, he can.
Okay.
It doesn't. I got wet on the front of the deck one time from a wave hitting it. The deck is 80 feet above the water, so that meant that the waves
Was more than. Oh.
Now that was a new type of ship, a new type of aircraft carrier. Were there any design problems they had to figure out? Were there any problems with the design that they had to improv with? Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah, it does. Well, he wondered if there were any design problems with the new Essex class carrier.
Yeah. They got plenty of them.
Anything that come to mind?
Because they're trying out new stuff. For instance, the catapult is that electronic deal instead of the steam catapult. You've all seen pictures of that.
Yeah.
But they're different because they don't take off on flight. They take off by caterpillar only. There's one thing that I've been told. The new ones, the ship is like this, but the landing area is on an angle. So you're coming in behind the ship. It used to be that you could line up with the ship and go in. This way, that thing, that Sallada over there is moving, and you got to get up over here someplace, correspond to have that spot when you want it there. It's given them. I've been told that. I have not talked to an actual pilot, but I've been told that by people that know. And it's reasonable that that angled landing area is hard to get lined up with.
I saw some pictures earlier. You had your flight deck was so big, I guess guys were playing baseball on it?
We didn't play baseball. It's 100 and some feet wide, 150 feet wide, and 850 feet long.
But I guess was the flight deck a meeting place for people? Was that a place that people would be out on the deck a lot?
No. Flight deck is void. Only people up on the flight deck are people that doing the job up there. On release days, refueling days, why then the deck is, the people down below come up and get a breath of fresh air.
Well, one last question. How many people were on that ship? About how many, approximately, how many people were on the aircraft carrier?
How many? A little over 2,000. It's a city. We had everything. We had barber shops, we had ice cream shops, we had post office.
How often would you get supplies?
Supplies?
How often would they arrive?
I didn't get.
How often did a supply ship come and receive?
About every 5 days. But it was mainly refueling because the destroyers would come to us to get their diesel, to get the fuel. They didn't last as long as we did, so they would come up alongside us, we'd refuel them, but then that was normally our 5th day was refueling day, and everything was stopped unless you were in the middle of something. But the 5th day was usually a relaxing day.
And what were the dimensions of the Essex again? Did you say 850 feet long? And
150 feet wide.
150 feet wide. What does this mean here, Paul? Fighting 83.
Fighting 83 is that was the total squadron of both types of fighters, the torpedo planes and the bombers. That was a complete squadron of the whole squadron of all four planes. I was connected just to the one,
which was the fighters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the patch of for the crews on the Essex?
Yeah, that was, don't ask me what the bottom is, because I don't know. I don't know what the wording on that bottom is.
It's a little Latin.
I got that from my future grandson-in-law.
I see. And this is a patch for any of the crew members from the Essex.
That was given to me Christmas time from him too. In fact, he gave me a plastic model of the Essex for me to put together. I didn't some pieces, and I haven't started it.
And last but not least, this right here.
You got me.
That looks like it says that he is a aviation ordnance man.
Okay, that's the big insignia of the aviation ordnance emblem that's on your patch.
On your sleeve?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Norman, Oklahoma.
Yep.
Is what they say, yeah. Okay. And I would like to also show, that's the plane with the bomber hanging.
Yeah, that's the Grumman fighter plane.
The Grumman fighter.
Yeah.
And this looks like a F4U.
That's the F4U landing, yeah. That's my baby.
And this looks like a TBM. I'm putting my neck out somewhat here.
That's your dive bomber.
It carried 3 people also? Or 2?
Huh?
This carried 2 men or 3 men?
2.
2? This is a dive bomber. This is not a TBM.
No, TBM is the torpedo plane. That's the SB-2C dive bomber.
Okay. This replaced that old Devastator, as they call it. Yeah. They're very similar to novices like me that weren't in the Navy. So after Japan surrendered, you're still there in October of '45. Where do you're still on board the Essex, so what happens after that? Where do you?
Well, it surprised me, but I was amazed that the pilot, my pilot, the guy that I flew with, he asked me if I had my 4 hours in when we were docked in Seattle. I said no, and he said, well, let's you and I go over in Sandpoint Navy Station. He said, and take a plane up for 4 hours. I haven't got my time in either. So we took off and got transportation over to Sandpoint Naval And we got a plane over there and took off and spent 4 hours flying around Mount Rainier and just flying. We went out over the ocean a ways and happened to run into a destroyer that was laying out there, and they called and asked if we would make a run on them so they could check the radar. So we did. And then I got back, and because the squadron was not really part of the Essex. The squadron was assigned to the Essex, but it wasn't actually Essex people. So we got out real quick after we hit port. After we hit Bremerton, they wanted to get rid of us. So within 10 days, I was on my way to Great Lakes for discharge.
So, what was the name of that squadron? I mean, did it have a number?
Well, that's at 83.
83.
Yeah.
And they were not part of the Essex.
No, squadron of fighters. I mean, the planes are not permanently part of the ship.
Okay.
They're just samples, visitors.
Temporary assignment then.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
And you went along with the squadron as
The squadron got fired right quick, so I got fired right quick. So.
And you were at Bremerton, and then where'd they send you to be discharged?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes?
Yeah.
And I show the date of your discharge is
October
the 11th, 1945.
Yeah.
And during all of this, where's Jane?
Jane's in Wichita, living at home.
And she has one child?
She had one, Paul, Bill.
So after you get discharged, how do you get home?
We went. I took the high-speed train from Chicago to Minneapolis, Hiawatha. It was high-speed train between the two cities.
What do you mean by high-speed train? This is 1945. What do you mean?
We were hitting 100.
What rank are you when you were discharged?
AOM first class.
Our aircraft ordnance
Ordnanceman.
maintenance for seaman first class.
Not seaman.
First class petty officer.
Petty officer.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So you went to Minneapolis, and why'd you go to Minneapolis?
Because my folks lived there.
Okay.
I wanted to see them, and then Jane came up to Minneapolis, and we stayed in Minneapolis for about 3 weeks. And then we took off and went down to Wichita to see her folks. And then traveled up to see some of her folks' friends up in Cleveland, and a guy in an electric company up there told me if I wanted to go to college to stop at Cincinnati and check the co-op deal. So we stopped here in Cincinnati on the way home, and I went through this college, and they had a refresher course, so we went, eventually I came back to Cincinnati, started the university, and James joined me.
Here in Cincinnati, is
Yeah.
what you mean? Co-op implies you were working somewhere.
I worked at Cincinnati Shoemaker Company.
Where was that at?
It's on Hopple Street and right before you went across the viaduct.
Yes. Yeah.
Beekman and Hopple.
Sure.
That's where they were at that time. Now they're out on Kilby Road out
Okay.
off of 275.
So what'd you do? Go to work 2 weeks and then go to school 2 weeks, or how did that work?
7 weeks. 7 weeks to school, 7 weeks to school of work.
And were you partaking of the GI Bill also?
Yeah.
And what were you learning at the Shaper Company?
Well, we went through all departments.
What were you producing though?
Producing,
Yeah.
shapers,
Shape. What do you mean?
machine tools called a shaper. They also made sheet metal shears and also sheet metal presses.
Okay. For guys like me, that means you can make dishes, bowls, stainless steel things for the tubs and
Yeah,
yeah.
most anything you wanted to make.
Yeah.
But they had heat treating, and we got into all the departments. I ended up in tool design for the last year and a half that I was there as a co-op. I was up in tool designing tools for the production.
Are you well paid while you're going to school, while you're co-oping?
Yeah. We're paid. That's how we'd know when co-op period was, when school was going to stop and you're going to start working, because the bank account got kind of low. You go back to work while you get some more money.
Where were you and Jane living at this time?
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. I lived in used to be a stable over on Vernon Place, 2-acre estate, and we had the apartment on the second floor of the stable. We had bedroom, living room, kitchen, and she wanted us as security because her mother died and she was by herself, Dr. Dunham's daughter.
From Dunham Hospital.
Huh?
From
Dunham Hospital. It was his daughter, and she didn't have any servants that stayed with her at night. So we were the security. And so we had an apartment for $25 a month with telephone, heat, light, furnished for 4 years.
That's pretty good. Was Jane working anywhere at this time, or going to school?
Jane was working over at Sears in the candy department. I worked at Sears in my spare time in the hardware department. I'd work there on Saturdays or Sundays, and we managed to do it. We had David was born, our second son. He was born when I had my calculus final for the year, the night before that, while he was born, so I didn't do too good on my calculus. Then, when I graduated, well, Jane was carrying my gene. So she went to my graduation via her mother.
And
then Steve was born after I got out of school and working at National Lead.
National Lead.
Yeah.
So when you graduated from school and got your degree, where did you go to work then?
I stayed with Shoemaker Company for about a year and a half, and it's a family company, and there was no future. And I had a chance to get in as senior engineer out at Fernald, and I had the chance of learning the machining techniques of uranium. I thought it might be a future, and so I wanted to get in the ground base of it. I served as senior engineer for 7 years, and then I was supervisor of the mechanical engineers in the production department for 7 years.
Where's Fernald located?
Out of Harrison, out that way. It was on what highway? It was on
Route 128 over in the eastern part of this, towards Indiana.
Yeah.
A little town out there starts with an O.
Near Ross.
Yeah, near Ross. Yeah. And what did you produce there at Fernald?
Fuel elements.
For nuclear reactors? Is that what they were for? And you were there for a total of 14 years? Why'd you leave?
Because it was dropping off. It was all the fuel reactors was for the government reactors, and they were closing them down. And it was changing, there wasn't as much machining, and that was my end. So I laid off some of my engineers, and when I laid them off, then I got laid off. We got a 6-month severance pay.
And where'd you go then?
And I went to American Standard Plumbing Company for a year as manager of product engineering. I couldn't stand them, so I left there, and I had gone to school with twin boys, college with twin boys. One of them owned a Cincinnati Electric Company and also Pleasant Electric Company. And he asked me to come join them because of my management experience. And they were low on management experience. So mechanical engineer, I went in as production into construction of electrical, and kept there for 14 years.
What was the name of that company?
Pleasant electric.
And where was that located?
Central Avenue and Liberty Street.
In Cincinnati?
Yep.
Central, Pleasant Electric at Liberty and Central, okay.
It was comical in one way, being a mechanical engineer and designing electrical systems, but that was all right. I learned.
And is Jane staying home at this time, or is she?
Jane was teaching. After the kids all got in school, then she went back and taught. And she taught 23 years.
Where at?
At Hamilton, in Hamilton School.
Hamilton?
She was in
Grade school or high school?
junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't teach in Fairfield because her kids were there. She didn't want to teach in the same school.
Yeah.
But she enjoyed teaching. It was profitable.
Mm-hmm. Brian, at this point, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't, but I think,
Pat, I was going to, yeah.
Yeah, I have a few.
Pat Allen is going to ask a few questions at this point.
You were talking about Jane working in the aircraft factory. How tall was Jane?
How tall?
Yeah.
5 foot.
Did she have a problem working in the factory? What did she do?
She was riveted on the wings.
Did she have to use a stool, or was she up on
Stool. Yeah.
And how long did she work in the plane factory?
She worked there for about 3 months. 4 months probably.
Let's go to the Battle of Okinawa. Did you have occasion on your ship to save any downed pilots from the ocean? Did you have any pilots that had been shot down that you guys saved?
Oh, the destroyers picked them up and brought them back to us.
Okay.
But when they brought them back, they'd bring them back on refueling day, so there was a cable between the destroyer and us, and they would barter and bid for them. If a lieutenant commander pilot was picked up and brought back to us, I keep him. We got enough of them. Keep him. We don't want him. And if seaman got picked up, that was when they argued. That's when they decided how many cans of ice cream and how many cases of bakery goods, the stuff that they didn't have on the destroyers. And they would stand there and argue for 5 or 10 minutes how much this guy was worth. And the lower class he was, the more money he was worth. The higher it was, I saw so many times pilots, oh, he's just a pilot. I don't know what he's going to do on your ship, but we don't need him. They wouldn't give him anything for it.
Well, were these pilots that had been rescued, would they go back up in another plane?
Oh, yeah.
And how would you get planes, how would you get your supply of planes restored to you, replenished?
We didn't. We had enough of them.
How many were in the entire squadron when you started?
You mean in planes?
How many planes in the whole squadron?
There were over 100 and some planes on the Essex.
All right. And
We had I think we had around 36 of our fighters.
Let me ask you about your trip to Hawaii when you're on the tanker and you're towing this 1 million gallons of airplane fuel. Were you unescorted, or did you have some escort ships?
Unescorted.
Did you have any Japanese submarines?
No, we had no trouble because it was from islands to United States, and they weren't in that area anymore. Thank goodness.
You mentioned that sometimes when the pilots would land, they would have thumbs up or thumbs down, and thumbs down was if they had some problem with the ordinance. What kind of problems would they have?
Oh, gun not firing, or anything like that.
How long would it take to repair that plane?
4 hours. Because they'd be flying on 4-hour cycles.
You told us that your ship had lost planes in the Battle of Okinawa, and were those planes lost in air combat or from flying over the island and getting damaged and destroyed?
I didn't catch that, I'm sorry.
In the Battle of Okinawa,
Yeah,
your Essex lost a number of planes and pilots.
yeah.
Now, did you lose those in air combat, or were they lost by ground fire going over the island?
It was mainly ground fire.
What can you tell us about the comparison between the Japanese planes and the planes on the Essex as far as maneuverability and other assets?
We won.
There you go, bottom line.
That's the best answer I ever heard.
The F-4Us were much more maneuverable than the Hellcats, and there used to be a heck of a lot of competition between the two squadrons of fighter planes that we had. I mean, they were always, we can outmaneuver you, and we're faster than you are, but the F-4U was the top plane.
How many planes did one of your pilots have to shoot down before they became an ace?
I don't know. None of them. We didn't get a lot of planes shot down.
An ace required 5 kills, but you didn't have any aces on the Essex when you were there?
Didn't have any aces.
Tell me something about when the planes would come in to land on your Essex and the arresting wire. How did they become unattached from the arresting wire?
The arresting wire they'd stop the plane, and the arresting wire would slide forward. The hook could go up and take. That hook was down to catch, and when after the plane stopped, the hook was elevated up to normal position, so they were away from the wire.
What would be the shortest time span between aircraft landing during an event?
Landing and stopping?
How much time would have to elapse between one plane landing and the next plane coming in? Would that be minutes or seconds?
Seconds. I mean, it was fast, because the minute the plane was unhooked, the wires were reset in the meantime while the plane was taxiing out of the way. They moved up to the front of the deck, out of the way.
Did you ever have any accidents where planes missed the arresting wire?
Oh yeah. And then they had arresting cables, arresting fences that came up out of the deck, and there was cables strung on it, and that would stop the plane.
So that was a second
That was
safety system.
emergency.
Did any of the pilots ever discuss any interesting, unusual stories with you about their air combat?
No, not particularly. No. We didn't have much to do with. The pilots were too busy doing their thing, and we were doing ours. We didn't communicate that much. The commander of the F4U squadron and I used to get together in his office to make sure that everything was going right, as far as particularly when he got orders for a bigger bomb or something different from routine. Well, he and I would get together, and they were, our office was, I guess it had more pilots going through it than anybody else, but we never, it wasn't a lot of.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. It's been very interesting for me.
Paul, I have
welcome.
I have one more question before we close. This is a picture of the aircraft all lined up there on the Essex. My question to you is, did each of these fighters or bombers take off from the same spot every time that they took off? Did they take off from up here, from the same spot basically?
Well, there was about here. There was that was a deck takeoff. These planes here would go up and take off with the catapult.
Okay.
Because the deck. You don't. That's an oddball picture.
But what Paul just said is that basically the planes up here that would take off from a catapult would take off from up here forward, and the rest of the planes would take off from back here.
Take off either way, either catapult or taxi off.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this interview, Paul. I want to thank you, and we appreciate.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you coming down here for this interview, and appreciate your service to our country. And we mean that from the bottom of our heart.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.